Thank you for joining AppTech. In today's segment, we'll create a server. Okay, so we'll create a server, then we can view our HTML document or we can write to the browser document. Okay, all right, so let's get going. So I'll be showing you several ways by which we can create a server. Okay. So this is our first way. I've created four different ways by which we can go through. We'll start from the least. Then as we climb higher, we go to the difficult part or the most uh, cumbersome parts. Okay, so over in this segment we'll be using HTTP. Okay, all right, so let's get going. As usual, we would have to import our model. Okay, so let's import our model. So let's HTTP require HTTP. Okay, all right, then in our next line we'll create a server now. So let's go on http dot create server. Alright. Okay. Now, in creating a server, when we are creating a server, we have to create a function, okay, which basically is like the normal callback that we've always been using. If you remember, the callback that we use to create ERR, okay, are error callbacks, okay. So with creating a server, okay, especially with a web application, we need something we call the request and the response, okay. So the request is what the client or the user is sending to the server through the web browser. Okay, and the response is what the server sends to the client to the web browser so that the client can view it on the web browser. If you understand what I'm saying. Okay. All right. So that's why you can see rec, which means the request, and res is the response. Okay. All right. So let's go on. So we create this two. So we create this function which takes in two parameters. Okay. All right. So our next task we are supposed to create now. So let's create. All right. So what we have to do now is to use a method. Okay, with a response. So in this instance, what we're about to do is we are sending a response to the customer. Okay, so that when the user goes to our website, okay, this is the feedback that the user gets. Okay, what we are returning to the user, that is the response. Okay, all right. So the response, we have what is called the right head. Okay, the right head basically sends HTTP header. Okay, to the client. Okay, the client in this sense, I'm talking of the web browser. Okay, whether Chrome, Mozilla, Edge, Safari. Okay, all right. Now, when you look at the right head, the first argument I pass to the right head is the status. Okay, the HTTP status. Okay, all right. 200 basically means okay. All right, so there are several HTTP status. We have 100 to 500. Okay, you can go through. You can go through the documents on the Node.js. Okay, then you can get a list of all the HTTP status code. Okay, all right. So I've defined the HTTP status code as 200. Okay, all right. So the next one that I need to define is the content type. Okay, that means that what am I going to write to what am I going to write to the or what am I going to return to the client? In this case, the browser. So anytime I use client is a browser. Okay, so what am I going to return to the client? Okay, so the content type I'm returning here, we are doing just a basic one. So I'm returning text plain. Okay, so I'm returning just a simple text message. Okay, all right. Now, after defining this right head, what we ought to define now is to use what is called the rest dot end. Okay, rest.end, what it basically does is it writes data to the document, to the body of the document, or to the body of the web browser. Okay. Now, when I'm talking about the body, if you can see where the arrow of my arrow pointer is this portion. Okay, this portion. Sorry, this portion. Okay, that is the body. Okay, that's the body of the web browser. Okay, so whatever is printed here is the body. So as you can see, this site can be reached. It's printed inside the body. Okay, all right. So I'll be writing a text inside this body. All right, so let's go on. What text am I writing? Let's do a normal welcome text. So we say hello, well, or hello, everyone. Okay, all right. So hello, everyone. All right. Then I end this with a new line. Okay, all right. That's fine. Okay. So when I'm done here, what I ought to do next is so this is basically going to write hello everyone, okay, inside the body, okay, of the document, okay, or of the HTML. All right, so what I'm going to do now is to write what is called a listing. Okay, what basically this listing does is that it's listening to so the port, okay, where your so every website, okay, listens on a particular port. Okay, okay, so you can define which port you want to listen on, any port that you want to listen on. Okay, if the port is a free port inside uh, your PC, okay, or your machine is a free port. It's a port maybe it's not used for other things. You can still use it. Okay, all right. So I'm using 8080, which is basically what is used. Is what is a port basically used for HTML, okay, or to listing on any HTTP server, okay, on local host, okay. All right, so I'm using 8080. You can use any other port if it is free, okay. All right, so after listing on this port, what do I want to do next? Okay, so I want to console log. So this console log will not print to the browser. It will just console log on my machine. So on this side, okay. All right, to tell me that the server is running or server listening or server is running. Let me just say server is running on port 8080. All right, okay. So basically, this is just a simple one. All right. So this is a simple way by which you can create a server, okay, at the back end. Okay. So over here, we are not using HTML. We are not writing any. We are not using any HTML tags and HTML doc type and everything. We are just using the server. Okay, so we are creating a server, or we are creating this HTTP HTML document on the server side. Okay, basically that's it. So when we run this function, you can see it says server is running on port 8080. Okay, so when we refresh this page, you can see, hey, bingo, you can see hello everyone. It's printed on the body. Okay, all right. So basically, that's the first way by which we can use the create server, okay, to print or to write data or to respond to data, okay, all right, to the or to send data to the client, okay, when the customer goes to or when the customer browse or when the customer goes or when the customer requests data, okay, from our URL, okay. So if you have a URL and the customer goes to your data, the first thing you see is hello everyone. Okay, so we've sent. So what we've done is that we've done our first. We've been able to create our first HTML, or we'll be able to send data to the customer when the customer requests for information on our server. All right, so this is the first way. So I'll go through the second way by which you can do a create server. All right, so as usual, let's import model. All right, so let's HTTP is equal to require HTTP. All right, so in this instance, what we are doing is let's call the FS model. Remember the FS model that we did earlier on? Okay, so at the file system module. All right. So what we are about to do right now is, if should in case you have an HTML, or you have an HTML code, okay, or you have a file, okay, that you've created or you've saved inside your document or inside a folder, okay, and you want to send a response or send response, okay, to the client, okay, when the customer goes to our website, okay. So I will use um, a file, okay. You can also create an HTML document, okay, and you go through the same procedure. It will still console log whatever, or it will still write to the browser whatever you have in the HTML file. Okay. All right. So I'll be using just a simple file. So what I'm doing, the example here I want to create, the idea I want to create is that if you have a file and you want to send a file as a response, okay, to the client when the user requests for data, okay, you can use it. You can as well send HTML file, but I'll be sending just a text file. Okay. All right. So let's go on. So let's create a server. So http dot create server function. We have our function. We have rest. We have rec response request. Okay. All right. Then we go on here. All right. So first thing what we'll do, let's use the right head, and the same thing we did for the previous example that I showed you. All right. So right head first 200. Okay. Then we have our content type. So we have our content type. I'm not using application JSON. I'll be using text. Okay. So if you have, if you are using an HTML or you are using a text, you can, so okay, I will just say text slash HTML, but I will not be passing HTML. Okay. I'll not be passing HTML here. I'll pass a text file here. Okay. All right. So first of all, let me do something here before I do the right here. Okay, so what I want to do here is I want to read the file first. Okay, so I want to read the file. So let's say fs dot read file. So what basically it means, I'm reading data from a file. Okay, we did this in our previous X. If you've forgotten, you can refresh your mind in our previous tutorials. Okay. All right. So I have a file, a text file named makers. Okay. So I'll just print out the makers. All right. So you can also save any file, maybe .html, okay, or a text file which you want to console log. Okay. So I have function error data. So if there's any error, okay, in the data, all right, so if that's the case, then I need to bring this over here and push this up. Okay. All right. Um, okay, so fs read file makers function error. So error, if there's any error, data is the file we want to read. Okay, so because we are reading a file, we'll use the method called write. Okay, so what write means is that we want to um, write, or want to pick the data, okay, right, pick the data from the file, okay, then write it, okay, on the browser. So it means, what it means is that we are writing this on the, so we are sending this response, so this is a response, okay, then what are we writing to the response? We are writing the content inside the data, okay, and what is holding the data? The data is this file, okay. So this file, the data in it is being held by data, okay, by this parameter, or by this parameter data, okay. So data is holding the content of makers.txt, okay. All right. All right, so if that's the case, if we understand it this way, then what we are supposed to do now is what are we supposed to do? We'll return the response dot end. So response dot end is um, when we say response.end, it means that that is we finished writing our data. So what are we writing again? We are not writing anything again. So we use the end. Okay. Now, if you want to write data to or send response to the browser or to the client, okay, you can use the write, okay, or you can use the end. But when you use the write, you should always have the end, okay, because the end basically says that okay, I'm done sending response, okay. If not, then you can basically write it to the end, okay. So whatever you remember in our previous example, we wrote it to the end, okay. We didn't use the write, so we use the end, okay. So that is another model, okay, which is the URL, okay. All right, okay. So this is another model. All right. Now let's go ahead. Let's create the server. So http dot create server. So we have our function reg res, okay. All right. Then we go here, we close here, we close here. Then we write into it. So what do we have here? So we have let kill. Okay, so kill will hold what URL dot pass dot reg dot URL true. Okay, so what basically it means is that we are about to pass, okay, a URL, okay, and we've created a function, a variable called kill, which is holding it, okay. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's do this. Let's have file name, okay. So now this what this so we are still using the makers. So let's use the makers file. You can still use your own file. So I'm using the makers file, then plus kill. That's the URL plus path name. Okay. Alright. Let's read the file. So we have fs dot read file. Okay. I have file name. So the file name is the makers. Okay. Then I have error, then data. So when you're reading a file, we definitely need to have data, which will hold the content of the file. Okay. All right. So I have here. Let's close this guy so that okay. All right, so you can write it inside. So what we are saying, we are saying if there is any error, okay, what it's supposed to do is it will console log. So basically, over here, what we are doing is that let me finish, then I'll explain what exactly we are doing over here for all four. Okay, then we have content type. Okay, I'm using content plain, but you can still use content HTML if you are using HTML file. Okay, so if you're using an HTML file, you can use content. You can use text slash HTML. If you're using a text file, you can basically use the normal thing. Okay, so I return rest.end. Okay, so what am I returning? I'm returning 404 not found. Okay, all right. Basically, let me just explain this. Let me just give some little explanation on this before. Sorry about that. Let me just give a little explanation of it before we go ahead. Okay, so basically, what we are doing now is we are reading the contents of a file. Okay, all right, and this is the file that we are reading. Okay, now if the file cannot be found, or if this file, okay, we input cannot be found, then it means that we want to return to the client this message: 404 not found. You get it? So if anytime the content of the file we cannot find it, we return this. Okay. If this file doesn't exist, or there's no data, or this file doesn't exist in us on our system, then we'll return this message to the client. Okay. 404 not found. Okay. All right. So when we are done with this side, what we do is we have our write 200 content. So basically, what this write-head is doing is this write-head is writing the response, okay, that will send to the client. Okay, all right. So we have 200 content type. Okay, so you can still use plain if you are using a text file like the way I'm using. If you are using an HTML file, then use text slash HTML. Okay, all right. Then we have rest dot write. Okay. All right. Then we have what are we writing data? That's the data inside the file. Okay. Then we have return rest.end. No, rest.end is empty. Okay. All right. Uh, Let me just explain if 80. So 80. Okay. All right. So what basically we've done is if this file doesn't exist, we will write this message. Okay, we'll send this message as response to the client when the customer browses, or when the customer browses our website. Okay, browse our website. That's what we'll send. All right, so let's run this. Okay, so because this file exists, you can see it's sending this response, the content of the file. Okay, so let's say this file doesn't exist. So let's use dot. Okay, so dot doesn't exist. It's not a file. Okay, now let's go check. Oh, sorry, I'm not running the. Okay, all right. So let me run it. Okay, so let's go check. So you can see 404 not found. Okay, all right, because this dot doesn't exist. Okay, now if I take it back to this one, you see that the data. Oh no, I need to rerun this. Okay, all right. Okay, so you can see the data has now um, has now been sent to the client. Okay, all right. One more thing you need to do is anytime you make changes here, you have to stop the server and run the server again. Okay, so you can see that I was having challenges. So anytime you make a changes, okay, on your function, okay, that's on your server, you have to stop it because at this point the server is running, so you can see it running. Okay, okay, so anytime you make a changes, for the new changes to take effect, you have to stop it with Control C, then rerun the server. Okay, or if you like, you can use the node daemon, which will automatically rerun the server, you will not need to stop it. So when there's a new changes, the node daemon will just pick the changes and update it. Okay, so when you run your or when you refresh your web browser, you see the changes already taking effect if you are using node daemon. Okay, I'm not using node daemon right now. That is why I always have to stop the server, okay, before continuing. Okay, so our last um, method, okay, that we will learn